3 years. 3 years since Vera Callahan last stepped off the porch of the old Whitmore farmhouse without a plan to come right back inside. 3 years of the same sentence, said to every neighbor, every county officer, every well-meaning woman from her mother's church who drove the 40 minutes out on Route 9 with a casserole dish wrapped in foil. The farm keeps me busy. She watched them nod. She watched them accept it. She watched them drive back down the gravel lane and disappear into the tree line, and she let out the breath she had been holding since she heard their tires on the cattle guard. 8 seconds was all it ever took for a stranger's pity to harden into something she could file away and forget. Then came the Tuesday in late October that smelt like wood smoke and cold mud. Seth Pruitt pulled into the yard in a rusted Chevy work truck with a boy of 8 sitting straight-backed in the passenger seat. The kind of straight that means the boy has been told to behave and has decided to take it seriously. Seth was there for the barn. The county extension office had referred him, someone who knew old timber frame construction, someone who could look at a failing beam and tell you the truth about it. He stepped out of the truck in work boots that had not been cleaned since the previous decade, and he did not look at the farmhouse. He looked at the barn. He tilted his head. He pulled a carpenter's pencil from behind his ear, and then he said 6 words before Vera had crossed half the distance between them. "That center post is lying to you." She stopped. No one had said anything true to her in 3 years. The morning had started the way most of Seth's mornings started since Carol died. He was at the kitchen counter of a rented double-wide in Millhaven, pouring cereal into a bowl he had already rinsed twice because the dishwasher had broken in August, and he had not replaced it yet. His son Luca was sitting at the table with his backpack on, which meant he was ready, which meant he was also watching his father the way 8-year-olds watch parents they have decided to worry about. The school called at 7:14, burst pipe in the east wing half the building closed, early release at noon. Seth looked at the ceiling of the double-wide for the length of one breath. "You can come with me," he said. "You'll have to stay quiet." "I'm good at quiet," Luca said, which was true in the way that only children who have spent time in hospital waiting rooms are true about quiet. The insurance settlement from Carol's accident had covered the hospital bills and left almost nothing else. The Whitmore barn job paid in a week what 3 residential repair jobs paid in a month. He could not say no to it. He could not leave the boy either. So Luca ate his cereal in the passenger seat of the work truck while Seth drove south on Route 9, the flat Indiana farmland unrolling on both sides like something that had given up trying to be interesting and had decided instead to be honest. The Whitmore farm sat at the end of a gravel lane behind a row of old maples that had been dropping branches since the previous ice storm. Seth saw the barn before he saw the house. He saw the center post through the open side door from 40 yards out, and felt his stomach drop the way it drops when you recognize a problem that has been politely waiting for someone to notice it. The post was bowed. Not enough to see without knowing what to look for. Enough that in the next hard wind, the whole south wall would make a decision the barn had been putting off for 2 seasons. He was still looking at the post when the woman came out of the farmhouse. She was in her mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back in the way of someone who does not think about it anymore, wearing a canvas jacket over a flannel shirt that had belonged to a larger person. She walked across the yard with the particular walk of someone who has learned to cross open ground without pausing, without looking around, without giving the open space time to feel like anything. She made it halfway before he said what he said. She stopped. He said it again, differently, so she would understand he was not guessing. "The post has been carrying the load wrong. Something's been compressing the base. If I had to put a number on it, you have got 1 season left before the wall goes." Vera looked at him for the length of time it takes to decide something. "How do you know that from here?" "Because I built 3 barns that looked exactly like that before I understood what I was doing wrong." He tucked the pencil back behind his ear. "I know the mistake from the outside now." Luca had climbed out of the truck. He was standing beside his father with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the barn the way his father was looking at it, which is to say with a kind of focused respect for a problem that had not yet been solved. He looked up at Vera. "Is that a milk barn?" he asked. "Dairy, originally," she said. "My grandfather's." "Do you have cows?" "Not anymore." He nodded. He had the face of a child who files information away for later use. He went to look at a beetle on the fence post, satisfied. The morning settled into work. Seth walked the barn floor and made notes on a steno pad, old habit. Carol used to say he would take notes at his own funeral. Every 12 feet he found something the previous repair had missed: a sister joist that had been bolted instead of properly tied, a sill plate rotting from the bottom where the drainage grating had settled wrong, a brace that was holding the weight. It was not designed to hold, because the brace it was supposed to share the load with had been removed at some point by someone who had not understood what they were removing. None of it was accidental. All of it was the kind of work done by a contractor who expected no one to look closely because the person who owned the property could not look closely. The contractor's name came up when Vera's phone rang while he was in the middle of taking measurements. She stepped away, but sound carries differently in open farm country than it does in buildings, and Seth had ears that had spent 18 years listening for the sounds that come before a structure fails. He did not hear the whole conversation. He heard enough. The name was Harlan Voss. He heard that. He heard already signed, and he heard you don't have a choice, and he heard Vera's voice go very quiet in the way voices go quiet when the person speaking has decided not to give the other person the satisfaction of hearing what they actually feel. She came back to the barn. She did not explain. He did not ask. It was the deed box that changed the morning. He found it because he was looking for the original constructural drawings, if they existed, anything that would tell him what the barn had looked like before whoever had gotten to it had gotten to it. Vera pointed him to a cedar chest in the tack room. The deed box was inside it, mixed in with the drawings, the kind of green metal lockbox that rural families used for 3 generations before banks started offering free document storage. It was unlocked. He was not trying to read it. The paper on top was not a deed. It was a sales contract. An option to purchase agreement, dated 6 weeks earlier, on letterhead from a company called Voss Agricultural Holdings, LLC. The price was fair by any measure he understood. The signatures were on every page. Vera's signature was on the final page, over a line that read, "Seller acknowledges all terms as stated above in Exhibit C." He had read contracts before. He had signed a few. He had not understood completely. He knew what Exhibit C meant generally, which is that it meant, look at Exhibit C. He found Exhibit C. Exhibit C was a clause that voided the seller's right to any portion of the mineral leasing income from the subsurface acreage in perpetuity. He sat back on the cedar chest and read that sentence twice. The farm sat on the eastern edge of the Trenton Formation. He knew that because he had done 2 jobs in this county in the past 4 years for landowners who had leased their subsurface rights for figures that had changed their family's circumstances for 2 generations. He was not a lawyer. He did not need to be a lawyer to understand that someone had inserted a single clause into a standard sales agreement in language flat enough to look like legal boilerplate, and that clause meant the woman who had walked across this farmyard to meet him had signed away the most valuable thing she owned and had not known she was doing it. He set the paper down. He thought about Luca somewhere outside, probably still studying that beetle or something else that had replaced it. He thought about the double wide in Millhaven. He thought about the job that had brought him here, and the check that came with it, and the man named Harlan Voss whose name was on that letterhead. He could put the paper back. He could finish measuring the post. He could take the check at the end of the week and drive back up Route 9 and leave the Whitmore farm and whatever was in that lockbox to the decisions that had already been made. He picked up his pencil instead. He found Vera in the kitchen garden at the back of the house, pulling dead stalks from the summer beds with the absent focus of someone who does not know they are not actually thinking about what their hands are doing. He closed the garden gate behind him. "I need to show you something," he said, "and when I show you, your first instinct is going to be to call someone. I'm asking you to hold off on that for an hour." She straightened. Her hands were dirty. She did not wipe them. "Who are you asking me to hold off on calling?" "That's the thing," he said. "That's what I need an hour to figure out." She looked at him for a long time. He had the feeling she was running some internal calculation he was not privy to. Whatever the result was, she opened the back door of the farmhouse and held it. "Sit down," she said. He sat. He laid the paper on the kitchen table between them. He pointed to Exhibit C. He did not editorialize. He read the clause aloud in the flat voice he used when he was telling someone their load-bearing structure was not what they thought it was. She did not react the way he expected. The color did not leave her face. Her hands, still dirty from the garden, came flat to the table on either side of the paper, and she stayed like that for long enough that the refrigerator cycled off and the kitchen got very quiet. "I read this contract," she said. "I had 3 days to read it. I read every page." Exhibit C was attached as a supplemental addendum. It's stapled separately if you weren't looking for it. He knew I wasn't looking for it. Her voice had not changed in volume. It had changed in temperature. "Harlan Voss has been my brother-in-law for 11 years. He handled every piece of paperwork after my husband died. He knew which pages I read and which pages I assumed were standard." Seth was quiet. "He also," she said, "is the one who referred you to me through the extension office." The temperature of the room dropped 1 degree at a time while the math arranged itself. "He wanted you to be here," Seth said slowly, when the deal closed. "He wanted a witness who didn't know enough to be a useful witness." She looked up at him. "He wanted someone standing in my barn with a steno-pad on the day I handed over the only thing left of my husband's family. He wanted me to have company while it happened. He is a man who is very careful about optics." Why would he? "Because the subsurface lease income on this acreage, if the formation tests the way the neighboring parcels have been testing, will produce more in the next 20 years than this farm will in 50. She folded Exhibit C once, precisely, and because my husband's will left everything to me outright, which Harlan contested for 8 months after the funeral, he lost. He has been waiting for another door ever since." "Does he know you know?" "He does not." She looked at him. "He is coming here on Thursday to walk the property with a soil engineer. The contract closes Friday." Seth set his pencil down on the corner of the table. Outside the kitchen window, Luca had migrated from the fence to the old stone water trough at the corner of the barn, trailing one hand along the mossy edge the way children do when they have found something that requires exploration and no one has told them not to. "What do you want to do?" Seth asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I need to know if the clause can be invalidated." "I'm not a lawyer." "I know what you are." She said it without sharpness. "I am asking whether you have ever looked at a piece of work and known, before anyone confirmed it, that it was done wrong." He thought about the center post. He thought about the sister joist. "Yes, this was done wrong. I can feel it. But feeling it and proving it before Friday are 2 different problems." She folded her hands on the table. "I had a lawyer. My husband's lawyer. After the will contest, Harlan." She stopped. "The firm dropped me 6 months after the contest ended. I didn't understand why at the time." "Harlan. His firm does significant work with Harlan's development company." "Yes." She looked at the window, at the boy by the water trough. "I have not trusted my own judgment about people since my husband died. I trusted Harlan because Wade trusted him. I signed a contract I should have had reviewed, because I could not afford to have it reviewed, and because the man who handed it to me had sat at our Thanksgiving table for 11 years. Seth looked at his hands on the table. Carpenter's hands, scarred along the knuckles. A burn mark on the right thumb from a heat gun used too close, too fast, and a job 3 winters ago. "My wife died," he said, 14 months ago. There was an accident on the interstate." She did not say she was sorry. She waited. "I almost signed something I shouldn't have signed about 6 weeks after, because someone put it in front of me at a moment when I didn't have the capacity to read it right." He looked up. "A neighbor caught it. I didn't even thank him properly. I was too embarrassed that I'd almost missed it." Vera was quiet for a moment. "Seth." It was the first time she had used his name. "Why are you sitting at my kitchen table instead of finishing the measurement on my post?" He thought about it honestly. "Because whoever set this up was counting on nobody looking at it closely, and I am very tired of things that are built wrong on purpose." Something in her shoulders released by a fraction. "Not much. Enough to see if you are watching." "Then I need one thing," she said. "I need to know if the addendum was part of the original document when I signed it, or if it was inserted afterward." He looked at her. The notary stamp. She was already standing. She went to a drawer beside the sink and came back with a magnifying glass, the old brass kind, the kind that gets handed down. She set it on the table between them. He looked at the notary stamp on the final page of the contract. He looked at the notary stamp on the Exhibit C addendum. He looked at both of them for a long time through the magnifying glass. Different ink density, he said. Same stamp, different day. The stamp on Exhibit C is lighter. It was applied to a page that already had the ink from the main document dried on it. The notary stamped them together, but they weren't signed together. Can you prove that? I can tell you what I see. Whether it proves anything depends on someone who knows more than I do. He set the glass down. Who do you trust? She thought about it for a long time. There is a woman named Paula Hewitt. She was Wade's aunt's neighbor. She practiced family and property law for 30 years before she retired. She lives 40 minutes north. Call her. She is going to think I am. Call her, he said again quietly. Not for me. Call her because Harlan Voss referred me to you and I am sitting in your kitchen and that should scare you enough to make the call. Vera picked up her phone. She set it back down. She picked it up again. Seth took his steno pad to the kitchen counter and left her the table. She talked for 11 minutes. He pretended to write notes about joists. When she set the phone down, her face was different. Not relieved, sharpened. The way a person's face changes when they have been afraid of a thing for a long time and have finally decided to be angry about it instead. Paula is coming tonight, Vera said. She wants the original contract, both copies if I have them, the addendum, and any emails from Harlan about the sale. She looked at him. She said the ink density argument is not enough alone, but she said if Exhibit C was added after signature, then the contract was executed fraudulently, and a fraudulently executed contract is void. Thursday, Seth said. He's coming Thursday with the soil engineer. Yes. Then we don't tell him anything has changed. We let him come. And while he is here walking my property with his engineer, I want him on record. Paula can advise about recording law, but I want him talking about this land and what he expects to get from it, and I want those words attached to his name before the contract is declared void. She said it the way someone says something they've been working out quietly for 11 minutes while someone else pretended to write notes. He'll bring his engineer, Seth said. I could be here, doing work, because I have a job here. He doesn't need to know I've seen the contract. You would do that. He thought about Luca at the water trough. He thought about the woman in front of him who had signed a piece of paper because 11 years of Thanksgiving dinners had made her believe she knew the man who handed it to her. He thought about his neighbor who had caught what he had almost missed, and how little it had cost that man, and how much it had meant. Yes, he said, I'll be here. Paula Hewitt arrived at 7 that evening in a 10-year-old Buick with a briefcase and the particular manner of a woman who had practiced law for 30 years and had not stopped practicing it simply because she no longer accepted clients. She had iron gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, and she sat at Vera's kitchen table and went through the contract page by page with a yellow legal pad and a pen. She clicked 3 times before she wrote anything. Luca fell asleep on the couch in the front room with a quilt. Vera pulled from a cedar chest without being asked, and Seth sat at the far end of the kitchen table and listened to the 2 women work. Paula looked at the notary stamps through the magnifying glass for a long time. She looked at the sequence numbers on the pages. She looked at something in the margin of the addendum that Seth had not noticed, a faint crease where the paper had been folded differently than the rest of the document. She set the glass down. The addendum was not part of the original signing, she said. I am not going to tell you I can prove that tonight. I am going to tell you that I have looked at enough documents in my life to know what a page looks like when it has lived inside a different folder than the pages stapled to it. She looked at Vera. This page has been somewhere else. The fold is wrong. Can we stop the closing? We can file for an emergency injunction Friday morning on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. I know a judge who takes property fraud seriously and moves quickly. She clicked her pen. But I am going to tell you something else. An injunction stops the clock. It does not win the argument. To win the argument, we need him to confirm what this clause was intended to accomplish. We need him to say it, or to write it in a context we can use. Seth looked up from the table. Thursday, he said. Paula looked at him. He had been quiet long enough that she had half forgotten he was there. He is coming Thursday to walk the property. I'll be here, working on the barn. If someone were to give him a reason to talk to, feel like the deal is already done, like he is already showing a colleague around a property he controls. Paula and Vera looked at each other. Indiana is a one-party consent state, Paula said. She clicked her pen once, meaning a party to a conversation may record it. She looked at Vera. If you are present, or if your representative is present with your knowledge and authorization. He won't talk in front of me, Vera said. He is careful with me. He will not know I know anything, Seth said. To him, I am a hired hand. He sent me here. He looked at Vera. If you stay inside, if I am the one walking the property with him, he will want to see the barn, Vera said slowly. He always wants to see the barn. He has been telling me for 2 years that the barn is not worth saving. Let him tell me that, Seth said. Thursday morning was cold and clear in the way of late Indiana October, the kind of cold that has a quality to it, that makes sounds carry farther than they should. Seth was up on the south wall of the barn with a pry bar at 7:30, doing actual work, because actual work was the only kind his hands knew how to do. Luca was inside the barn below him, handing up nails with the focused seriousness of a child who has been given a job and intends to perform it correctly. Harlan Voss arrived at 9 in a black pickup that was 3 years newer than anything on this property had a right to be. He was 60, broad in the shoulders, wearing the kind of canvas jacket that costs 4 times what it looks like it costs. He had a man with him, younger, carrying a tablet and a soil probe. He did not go to the farmhouse first. He went to the barn. Seth came down off the wall. He pulled off his work glove and offered his hand. You're the one who called the extension office? That's right. Harlan shook it. The grip of a man who has spent his life making sure his grip registers. Harlan Voss, good to meet you. How's the structure? Worse than it looks, Seth said, which was true. That's what I figured. Harlan looked up at the south wall with the expression of a man confirming something he has already decided. I've been telling Vera for 2 years this barn is a liability, not an asset. Costs more to maintain than it's worth. He said it to the soil engineer, not to Seth. The way people say things to the person they think is their audience. Once the property transfers, the plan is to take it down in the spring. Open the acreage. For what? Seth asked. He kept his voice the voice of a man making conversation, a man with a pry bar who is mildly curious. Harlan looked at him with the small assessment of a man deciding how much a hired hand needs to know. He decided the hired hand needed to know enough to be impressed. There's a formation under this land. Trenton limestone. The geologic surveys came back in August. The subsurface lease potential on this acreage, he glanced at the soil engineer, who nodded. We're talking generational income. 10, 20 years of lease payments that would have gone to a woman who didn't know what she was sitting on. He said it without malice. That was the part Seth found hardest to carry. He said it the way someone describes a piece of luck, a found thing, a gap in a fence that happened to be where you needed it to be. The sale already closed? Seth asked. Friday. Harlan smiled. It was not an unkind smile. It was the smile of a man who has been patient for a long time and has almost reached the end of the patience. She signed everything. She didn't have anyone looking out for her. That's not my fault. He looked at the barn. It's a hard thing, but Wade would have wanted the land to stay in the family, and it is staying in the family. Seth looked at him for a long moment. The family, he said. My side of it? Harlan shrugged. Wade's gone. Vera's not a boss. The land should be with people who understand what it's worth. Seth nodded once. He climbed back up to the wall. He did not say anything else. Harlan walked the property for an hour. He spoke freely to the soil engineer. The phone in Seth's shirt pocket, Vera's phone, borrowed that morning, recorded all of it. When Harlan's truck pulled back down the gravel lane and disappeared through the maples, Vera came out of the farmhouse. She stood in the barn doorway. Seth came down off the wall a second time that morning and handed her the phone. She looked at it. She looked at him. He said Wade would have wanted it, she said. Yes. Wade built this barn, she said. He and his father over 2 summers. He put this center post in himself. She looked up at it, the bowed post, the lie it had been telling the roof for 2 seasons. He would not have wanted this. Seth picked up his pry bar. Then let's make sure he doesn't get it. Paula Hewitt filed the injunction at 8:15 Friday morning, 45 minutes before the closing appointment. The judge reviewed the recording and the notary stamp analysis and the fold differential and signed the emergency order at 10:40. The closing did not happen. Harlan's attorney called Paula 3 times before noon. Paula took none of the calls. By the following Wednesday, the state attorney general's office had opened an investigation into Harlan Voss and 2 notaries who appeared in his company's transaction history. By the end of the month, 3 other property owners in the county had come forward with similar agreements bearing the same late added inda, the same ink density differentials, the same wrong folds. Bear's contract was declared void on a Thursday morning 23 days after Seth had found the lockbox in the cedar chest. He was on the barn roof when she called him with the news. He came down and she was standing in the yard with the phone in her hand and her eyes wet, which she seemed to find embarrassing, which made her look at the barn instead of at him. "The center post," she said. "What does it actually need?" He studied it. He had been thinking about it for 3 weeks. New base, new footing, steel tie at the top to redistribute the load to the secondary posts. 3 days of work, maybe 4. "Can you do it?" "That's why you called the extension office." She almost smiled. Harlan called the extension office. "Yes, well." He looked up at the post. He was wrong about the barn. Luca was sitting on the fence rail at the edge of the yard watching them with the look of a child who understands that something adult and important has just been resolved and who is waiting to understand what it means for him. He had been coming to the farm every day for 3 weeks, sitting on various fences and railings, collecting information about tractors and beetles and the names of birds. He looked up in a field guide Seth had found at a church sale. Vera looked at him. She looked back at Seth. "There is a room in the north part of the house," she said. "Wade and I were going to make it a nursery. It has good light. It has a window that looks over the east field." She said it to the middle distance, not quite to Seth. "It has been closed for 4 years. I have not opened it." Seth waited. "I would like to open it," she said. "I think it should be a room that gets used." He picked up his stenopad. He did not make a note on it. He held it and looked at the barn. "There are 11 properties in my county that need work done properly," he said. "Real work. Not the kind that gets done when someone expects no one will look." "Is that a yes?" "Let's start." Luca slid off the fence rail and landed in the gravel with both feet, raising a small cloud of dust. He looked at his father. He looked at the woman by the farmhouse door. "Is the barn going to be okay?" he asked. "Yes," Seth said. "Good." Luca pushed his hands into his jacket pockets. "I told the beetle it was going to be okay. I didn't want to be wrong." Vera looked down at him with the look of someone encountering a thing they had forgotten they were capable of feeling. She had looked at a lot of things in 3 years with a careful blankness she had practiced like a second language. This look was different. "Luca," she said, "I have a field guide inside that has a section on beetles. It has illustrations." She looked at Seth once, briefly. "You are welcome to look at it whenever you are here." The boy looked at his father for permission. Seth nodded. Luca followed Vera to the farmhouse door without hesitation or ceremony, the way children follow people they have decided to trust, which is to say with their whole body, all at once, no reservation. Seth stood alone in the yard for a moment. The maples at the end of the gravel lane were past peak, most of the leaves down, the branches showing themselves honestly for the first time since spring. The barn stood where it had stood for 70 years, its south wall still bowed, its center post still lying about how much it could carry, but only for now. He picked up his pry bar. He had work to do. I keep thinking about the moment Seth found that paper in the cedar chest. He wasn't looking for it. He wasn't hired to look for it. He was there for a barn post that had been lying about how much weight it could carry, and he found something that had been doing the same thing in a different language. He could have put it back. That's the part that stays with me. Nobody would have known. The job paid well. The man who sent him there was powerful enough to make future jobs disappear if things went sideways. And Seth had a boy to feed and a rent check to write and a dishwasher that had been broken since August. He had every practical reason in the world to fold that paper back along its existing crease and walk out to finish his measurements. He didn't. And I think the reason he didn't has nothing to do with courage in the dramatic sense. No speeches. No moment of cinematic clarity. It has everything to do with the kind of person you have already decided to be before the hard moment arrives. Seth had spent 18 years learning to look at structures honestly. He had built 3 barns wrong before he understood what he was doing wrong. That kind of work. The kind that requires you to tell the truth about what you're seeing even when it's your own mistake. That doesn't stay in the barn. It follows you into kitchens. It follows you into cedar chests. It becomes the way you move through every room. What Harlan did came from a different kind of accumulation. 11 years of Thanksgiving dinners. 11 years of being trusted because he was family, which meant he was never really looked at closely. He used that trust the way a bad contractor uses a wall. He let it carry a load it was never designed to carry, and he kept adding weight, quietly, until the moment he needed it to hold something enormous. A fraudulent addendum. A clause buried in language flat enough to look like nothing. He didn't think Vera would look closely. He had done the calculation, probably 100 times. And the calculation kept coming back the same way. She was grieving. She was alone. She didn't have anyone in her corner who knew what to look for. He forgot about the man he sent to fix the barn. That's the thing about choosing to look honestly at the world. It makes you useful in moments you never anticipated. Seth didn't walk into that farm as anyone's hero. He walked in as a hired hand with a steno pad and a boy who wanted to know about beetles. But because he had built his whole working life on the practice of seeing things as they actually are, not as someone wanted him to see them, he recognized a wrong fold in a document the same way he recognized a bowed post from 40 yards out. The skills are not different. The integrity required to act on what you see is not different. And Vera. 3 years inside a grief she had let become a fortress. Not weakness. I want to be clear about that. There is nothing weak about a person who is trying to survive the unsurvivable, but there is a cost to staying inside the walls too long, and the cost is that eventually someone who means you harm learns the shape of your walls better than you do. Harlan knew exactly which door to use. What changed for Vera was not Seth finding the paper. It was Vera deciding, in a kitchen with dirty hands and a magnifying glass on the table, that she was still the kind of person who could fight for what was hers. That took something the contract couldn't touch. It took the willingness to pick up the phone and call Paula when every instinct built by 3 years of isolation said it was too late, too complicated, too humiliating to admit she had been fooled. She made the call. That's where it turned. Not in a courtroom, not in a filing. In a kitchen, at a table, with a woman who had decided that being wrong was less important than being honest about it. I think about Luca telling the beetle the barn was going to be okay. He didn't know if it was true. He said it because his father had taught him, without words, that you tell the truth about hard things and then you pick up the pry bar and you do the work. That's enough. That has always been enough.